Welcome to season 3 of Moving the Needle on our Wicked Problems podcast. This is so exciting to be back with another season packed full of interesting speakers and insights and guests to discuss some of the really difficult problems facing our society, and they somehow seem to keep growing. So it's a good time to kick this off again. What do you think, Paul?
Well, I just want to say welcome back, Senator. I'm excited to be with you for season 3. I think we can, build off a very successful couple seasons, bring on some guests, have topics that will, not only inform our listeners, but challenge their ideas and perspectives.
So we're kicking off our season 3 with the question and the context around a really important relationship, that between Canada and Germany. In the last year, there has been lots of talk and strengthening of the relationship. The Prime Minister and our Governor General have traveled to Germany, and more recently, the German Chancellor Olaf Scholz visited Canada. This shows that Canada and Germany have a long and lasting relationship, and one that they clearly want to grow.
Yeah, absolutely, Senator. And, this is definitely an important one. We have, very big geopolitical challenges that both countries face. The brutal invasion by Russia and Ukraine, and that's impact being felt around the world, but especially in Europe. We have mass migration and how to deal with people on the move, either economic migrants or refugees. These are just some of the topics that we covered today. So let's get to the interview.
There is no one better to help us understand the relationship between Germany and Canada than my guest, Ambassador Sabine Sparwasser, the ambassador of Germany to Canada. She knows Germany obviously very well, but she knows Canada actually really, really well, having lived in Canada in various postings and now having Canadian family as well. So no one better to get us started off on this subject. But let's get to know you a little, Ambassador. I'd like to know what it was like for you to grow up in Germany, especially during the Cold War. Germany, of course, is very different today than it was then. Try and build an imaginative bridge for us back to the past.
Yeah. Well, I was born in 1958 and I grew up in the Rhineland, and that was the part that was under French direction. And we still, at that time, I still do remember being a child and actually totally forbiddenly playing in house ruins, in these houses where you have the sinks hanging from the walls, and they were condemned, but they were still there. The ruins were still there. And I also do remember when I was a kid in school that we did these exercises where kids would for a bomb alarm, have to go under the desk. So that still existed. At the same time, in my youth and in my life, the trajectory was so upwards. Germany was recovering economically. We were joining the European structures that became the European Union. We were friends with all our neighbors. Everything was getting better all the time. For a very long time. So it's actually, it was a very, very positive time to live in, to grow up in, because it was a time of peace and prosperity, all in all. And, and then we went over to 1989 and the extraordinary happiness of unification. And, there was that feeling everything is going to get better, and soft power will reign, and then things didn't turn out to be like that.
I'm thinking as you take us back in time, Madam Ambassador, that you probably grew up as a child in the best time in Europe.
Yeah, that's right.
Post-Second World War, Reconstruction, reunification, the growth of social liberal values, really brilliant. And now you are at one of the highest levels of your country, representing your country's aspirations and desires in Canada. What drove you to become a diplomat?
Yeah, it wasn't my first choice. I wanted to be a journalist. And I worked as a freelance journalist in Paris and studied in Paris, but I also worked for two professors who were both at Sciences Po, who were both professors of German origin, German Jewish origin, and who both worked extremely hard for reconciliation and the growing together of Germany and France and the growing together of Europe as a peace project. And I think those were the two people, Alfred Grosser and Joseph Bonbon, who really instilled this enthusiasm, also because of their personal history, because of they were Jews persecuted and driven from Germany and were lucky to escape the Holocaust. And that part of history too was my motivator in many ways to sort of be a small wheel in a country that stands against such things ever happen again.
So fast forward to today, Canada and Germany have never had a stronger relationship. I think you can take a great deal of credit for that, Madam Ambassador, outside world factors that nobody could imagine. I heard you say recently that we're such good friends that we complete each other's sentences.
We can.
What is all this based on? Can you tell me?
Yeah, it's very interesting. I think I think about it a lot. I mean, we're federal countries. That's important. We're countries that put a high importance on harmony and sort of consensus decision making. I mean, peace, order, and good governance stands it's a high value in the Canadian constitution, and it's very high. These notions are very high in the German reality. We do have joint values. We do have joint values when it comes to human rights, when it comes to gender rights. We are also, as nations, very complementary, because in Canada is a huge, vast country with so many natural resources, and we're this tiny, highly industrialized a country with 83 million people on it, and so the complementarity is enormous, and we're actually only starting to develop all the cooperation that we could have. But I think it's a mentality as well. We have between Canada and Germany an outstanding science cooperation. For example, we have 800 science corporations, and every time I bring people together into a kind of meeting, they come out and they've started another project. It's just because we fit.
We fit. And we fit in terms of Germany's aspirations, necessity to be independent or more independent in natural resources and gas, and Canada has some potential. Would you want to comment on the green hydrogen deal, which is pumping us all up in a significant way? When do you think it will go beyond aspiration to reality?
This is our biggest job right now. So the hydrogen deal was the green hydrogen deal was the biggest outcome of this very, very successful visit Chancellor Scholz and Vice Chancellor Habeck paid to Canada. And I have to say the Canadian government was there all the way. The Prime Minister accompanied the trip from start to finish. And we had many, many different other areas and successes, but the green hydrogen deal is basically the establishment of a green energy bridge across the Atlantic. And the problem about green hydrogen has always been it's new, it's a technology that's been known for a while, but there hasn't really been a market. So everybody says, oh, we can't invest. There comes a point when you want to go to a revolutionary new technology where you need the big investment and the buy-in of countries. And this is what happened in Stephenville in Newfoundland. We had both governments there, we had businesses there, the provinces, all the Atlantic provinces premiers had come. And basically what we agreed on was we, Germany, are going to be the off-takers for green hydrogen produced in Atlantic Canada. We want to establish technology partnerships with the ones producing it. And on the Canadian side, the assurance is we are going to cut red tape. We are going to help get the regulations right so that the technology, the wind farms, the electrolyzers can be put up very soon. And we will help to try and get investment going. So if you bring all of these elements together and you have the buy-in of the provinces, which we do, there is a very good chance that this is actually a fabulous start to really a new energy bridge. So the energy bridge wouldn't just go for green hydrogen, it could also go for critical minerals, for example. And if you look at the situation of Atlantic Canada, it's close to Europe. It's not densely populated. It has the perfect wind conditions. And it also has, from its time in World War II, it has deep sea ports and the whole infrastructure that it's needed. So I think we're onto a really big thing, and we're at the start. We put down the fundamentals, and this is now our biggest job to make it work.
Now, you know, much of this discussion obviously has been started, you know, with the backdrop of probably the biggest issue geopolitically in the last, you know, number of years, really, and that's the invasion by Russia in Ukraine. You know, it's sort of created maybe stronger alliances. NATO has been emboldened, maybe a couple new members of NATO. The EU has been strengthened. But it doesn't seem to slow down, you know, Russia. And obviously there's been talk about, you know, potential of even more catastrophic things, of nuclear attacks. What do you think Canada, Germany, and the rest of Europe and NATO can do to, you know, help Ukraine win back their land, but then eventually, hopefully, get to some sort of peace, you know, in this situation?
Yeah. I know. I 2 days ago, I met my Ukrainian colleague, and we looked and counted. We're at day 226 now of that war, which we thought would take 5 days. A lot of people said, oh my God, in 5 days, after 5 days of Russian onslaught, Ukraine will not be able to resist. Ukraine has shown incredible resilience and bravery, and its people have really shown they do want their freedom, they want their independence, but they're not just fighting for themselves. They're fighting for freedom and for Europe as well. So, I mean, it's very clear that we will have to do everything in our power, and we will stand with them as long as it takes to push back that Russian attack. We have done a lot. And the Americans, foremost, have done a lot. And I think the fact, obviously, with the very modern arms that have been provided to Ukraine, and with their incredible skill, they have been able to push back the attack, and they are able actually right now in the oblasts to pushing back the attack every day a little bit. So we will have to continue to do that. Germany is more than ready to do more, and Just today, I think we had news that we're giving more of these very high-tech weapons, like there's a counter battery radar, very important, or these howitzers, these modern howitzers, very effective. So this continues. The flow of what we can provide continues. Unfortunately, you know, these it takes time to build those things, so we're sometimes not as fast as we would like to be. But we are providing Ukraine with that crucial military help. But in a bigger context, we're obviously also providing Ukraine with massive, between the individual states and the EU, massive financial help, humanitarian help. We by now have 1 million Ukrainians in Germany, and we welcome more. The next step is also one that's going to be taken very soon, which is beyond the horror that's happening now in Ukraine, to look at rebuilding Ukraine. And Germany and the EU together will this month host a donors conference where we already look towards what are the needs, how this is going to be Europe's greatest obligation, to see that Ukraine can come back onto its feet, and then to smooth the path of a Ukraine joining the European Union. So that perspective is the one we're working for, and I think that's also the light at the end of the tunnel for Ukrainians. And to have that solidarity. And Canada is a very strong partner. Canada knows Ukraine extremely well. You have so many Ukrainians. You've done very much for training them and making them such good soldiers too. We do count on Canada to continue to be that strong and staunch partner of Ukraine in this.
And what do you think about the sort of where Germany is now and the political leadership on their position on Russia and a relationship with Russia? Obviously, there has been tried to be closer ties. Energy needs of Germany were being fed by Russia, and gas and that sort of thing. Where is Germany now on this relationship? Obviously, you articulated, you know, everything that Germany is doing, but has there been a rethink to this relationship?
Oh yeah, I think the 24th of February. We call it Zeitenwende. It was a total sea change, and you know, geography, you can't change it. So to have tried to bind or to have Russia be part of a European security structure, that is something I think was the right thing to do for many years. But to have not seen the signs that Russia didn't want to be part of that structure and that Russia had imperialistic ambitions, we should have seen that much earlier. And our president has actually voiced that and has said how wrong we read the signs, and we should have reacted much earlier and actually listened to countries who kept telling us that Russia has bad intentions, and we shouldn't be giving ourselves into that much of a dependence. Now, I've just read, or earlier read another, the recent speech given by Vladimir Putin, and I find it is really spooky because he nearly does, or he talks just a little bit about the war against Ukraine and a little bit about the annexations, but most of it, he draws a big picture on how he is the one defending the world against the West, and he has to fight the West. And then there are some allies of the West who are actually not really allies because they're colonized. And he mentions Germany in that respect. So, I mean, you see a much broader picture. See, I mean, he made it very clear that this is much more an attack on on all of us in the West. And I do believe Germany is very much in his focus. He lived in Germany. He was there when, for him, the traumatic thing happened, the fall of the wall. And he was in Dresden in his office, and he had to run away from the mob who wanted to storm his office. So for him, it was the biggest catastrophe. And for us, it was the greatest moment in our history.
I mean, a dictator that is backed into a corner, that's having maybe delusions, is not a good position for everyone to be in the world to be in, and that's a dangerous thing. And I wanted to talk, because you had mentioned it earlier, about rebuilding Ukraine, hopefully sooner than later. Maybe in essence, there are some rebuilding going on now in the areas that Ukraine has liberated, or at least held on to, at least at the beginning of the war as well. One of the things that Canada did just recently, they passed in June, was, and this was obviously the senator's lead. She started with this as a private Senate bill, and then it became a part of a government legislation about using the sanctions regime, so Canada can sanction individuals or entities. They've sanctioned over 1,000 Russians that have assets in Canada. And the idea is not only to freeze their assets, but to repurpose their assets, confiscate and then repurpose to help the victims of this brutal war in Ukraine. I'm wondering, is that something that's taking hold in Ukraine or in Germany? Sure. Is there, or also, what is the vision of Germany about the rebuilding of Ukraine and how they want to participate in that? We have had some discussions, or the senator has, with some Green members of the coalition and German government that are interested in these ideas. So I'm just curious about where that is.
Well, I was intrigued by that idea a long time ago when you started that, Ratna. And I did a lot of reporting home, because I thought this is, it's not just symbol politics. It really, really is a very strong, it's a strong message. It also, I mean, people have considerable means. They hide in Europe and elsewhere. And also, it would be a sense of justice done for population. So I felt it had all the elements of being a brilliant proposal. And I reported home, and I received quite a bit of interest. We had, in particular, social democratic politicians here who took the proposal home and want to lobby for it. I think you will probably find between sort of the Green Party, the Social Democratic Party in Germany, there's a lot of interest for the proposal. It does run against a difficulty. The German constitution protects property.
Right.
And so property rights, it was something it's a difficulty we ran into also after unification, you know, sort of returning, or how do you go about it? And we have a pretty strong protection of property, private property. And also you run into the problem that these oligarchs or dictators are pretty good at hiding the ways in which they bring their money abroad. And again, it's not easy to overcome. Having said that, I still think it's a project that we should be pursuing. And I know there are a number of people in Germany who will put proposals forward. I can't predict how it's going to end, but I think, personally, I think it's a very worthwhile, very important proposal. And we were glad to report that the Canadian government took on your idea, and maybe we can get them to push it in the G7, and then we follow their lead.
That would be, of course, wonderful. I just came back from Berlin, where an MP told me, an MP who works on anti-corruption, told me there is 100 billion euros of corrupt money in Germany annually. A lot of this is allied to the Russian oligarchs. So when nation states are looking at how do we finance this in the short and the long term? There's an idea. Let's shift gears to a subject you and I have talked about for many years, migration. We're both countries of migrants, immigrants, call them what you like. Germany has welcomed, God, 1 million Syrian refugees in 2016. Now you're welcoming 1 million temporary residents, maybe from Ukraine. But your country has an aspiration to grow and stabilize and prosper in many ways. And one of the policy levers is immigration. There's always been debate about a welcoming environment. You know, I lived in Germany when I was a young student, and I was from India and exotic, and everybody welcomed me. But I did notice how that welcome was not extended to the Gastarbeiter. Things have changed a lot in Germany. So can you talk to me a little bit about the climate in Germany today? How do Germans think about immigrants? How do they welcome them? How do they integrate them? Is there a difference, as I'm sure there is, based on regionality? And how do you figure all these things out?
That's a huge question, Ratna, and you can answer it better than I can. But yeah, the climate in Germany has changed significantly, and Germany has accepted by now that it's an immigration country. We know we need it, and we've become such a multicultural society that it has totally changed the way we look at this. Does that mean xenophobia and anti-immigration opinions are non-existent? Unfortunately, not, no. And we do have one particular xenophobic right-wing party that is actually has an agenda that's anti-immigration. But the mainstream in Germany, sort of the largest part of the population, knows and welcomes the idea that we have people come and join us. Now, the point system that the Canadians have, where you look for people who are likely to succeed in your country, is an attractive one. The coalition is actually, the government coalition is working on adapting our system to have that kind of point system. We will still take in refugees, I do believe there is a readiness to take in refugees. Would there be a readiness today, especially in an economic situation where people are struggling and people, you have to imagine people who are at the low income end, now their energy bills have doubled or tripled and they can't afford it. Would they welcome to have another sort of big wave of immigrants come in like 2015? Probably not, to be perfectly honest. Ukraine is different in the sense that, yeah, everybody understands what is happening in Ukraine and that we need solidarity, and Ukrainians have been welcomed really with open arms in Germany, and I think we'll continue to do that. But I wouldn't want to predict that the climate altogether will not suffer in an economic recession, which we're going into. And the winter is going to be a hard time. And, you know, the war we're in is an energy war. It's a food war when you look at the global south, but it's also obviously an opinion war. It's a cyber war, and the attacks on our population's cohesion, on our population's opinions, are very visible and not without success. I think we need to be very, very careful about that, because we need immigration. We want to have it, but we should really make sure that opinion, the public welcome is there. We should help our population in that.
You're absolutely right. Whichever way the economy goes, that way goes the public sentiment and support for immigration. When people feel they don't have houses or they can't afford to rent them, it's the same. It's the same narrative in Canada as well. Of course, it's a little bit more immediate in Germany because you're facing a cold winter, and I'm really hoping you all stay warm because it's not an ideal situation to keep a whole population in Europe cold through the winters that I know you have. I just came back from Berlin, and I have to say, I live in Toronto, and we think of Toronto as a multicultural city, but really one has to go to Berlin to experience the kind of cultural multiculturalism that you can experience. It's absolutely brilliant. And this conference I was at, there was a lot of talk about migration, and if there were two voices that were almost echoes of each other, it was Germany and Canada. Values-based, forward-looking. It's and I in the closing plenary, I proposed that Canada and Germany go beyond dating and formalize their relationship on migration by developing a coordinated bilateral agreement between the two countries on immigration, selection, foreign credential recognition, citizenship laws, systems and protocols, which would take us beyond, the nice sharing of best practices, but to actually agreeing possibly in the beginning to at least explore a few processes and protocols together, such as, none of us know precisely how to qualify professionals who come from overseas in the shortest possible time so that they can meet the labor market's needs. Yeah. What do you think of that idea?
I think it's a perfect idea. This is the time now. We always have agreed on everything, or virtually everything, between Canada and Germany. And right now is the time to sort of turn that into concrete projects. And yours is a fabulous one. I would add as the first thing, and beyond just sort of best practices, first thing, the private sponsorship. I would your project of a real partnership could start with how do we do it with the private sponsorship program? Because we tried it out in Germany, but it wasn't much publicized. It didn't really work out that well. But if we could get a kind of maybe even tutoring, working together on how do you do it, how do you bring together, do pilot projects on it, I think this is one of the best immigration projects, because not only does it give people immediately a welcoming group within the country, but it also gives citizens the feeling that they're involved. It's not immigration, it's not something that's happening to your community, it's something you're doing. And I think it creates a much better agreement to it.
You've given me an idea to start with, because I was wondering, how do I paint in the pictures in this agreement? And you're absolutely right. As a private sponsor, I will tell you and my audience, it's a win-win-win-win-win, because the private sponsors also gain a great deal from the experience. So, Ambassador, our time is coming to a close. I have one final question for you. Canada does not have an ambassador, hasn't named an ambassador to Berlin yet, and we're all, I'm sure you're also waiting with great excitement. What words of advice would you give to our new ambassador, whoever he or she is?
Very good question, and I do look forward. I have to say, with Stefan Dion, the previous ambassador, we worked like two bookends on the same files, and always sort of pushed things so that they came together. And my first request to a new ambassador would be, please let us continue to do exactly that. And yeah, what other advice? I mean, Canadians don't need it. Well, a good advice in Germany is also, we're a small country, but we're also quite diverse. And don't just think Berlin is everything. Go into all the parts of Germany, but also enjoy, because you're in one of the places where you are so beloved that it's a fun posting for any ambassador.
I certainly experience the admiration that Germans have for Canadians every time I go back. So thank you very much, Madam Ambassador. This has been very insightful, a great kickoff to our season. Thank you to our listeners. And if you have any questions or suggestions for topics or guest speakers, please do let us know. Write to me on Twitter or to my Senate email. We, of course, would love to hear from you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.